Hey everyone, welcome back. Episode 7. We love you, Warriors. Thanks for coming back to be with us.
Yes, we are so excited to be with you and to explore a very relevant and fun topic. People pleasing.
People pleasing. When we were on the hunt for topics for this week's episode, it was like, what's a good one that everyone definitely has some experience with? Even people that aren't necessarily anxiety warriors like we are. Think that at some point or another, we did something because we thought we were supposed to, or because we were worried about not being liked or accepted by another person or group of people if we didn't. And so we hope this topic will be a really fun and juicy one that lots of folks can relate to.
Yeah. How did people pleasing show up in your life?
I mean, when I was younger, whenever I'd be around just like people I admired or I looked up to or that I wanted to be like or whose energy spoke to me, I would kind of feel like this almost performance like quality coming out of me. It would just like pop up like I need to act a certain way or laugh at certain things or behave in some kind of special way, basically not be myself completely. In order to be like the kind of person that I assumed this other person or group of people wanted out of the people around them. And let me tell you, it was exhausting, mentally and physically draining. And then as I got older, it was more about like worrying about disappointing people. And this became more about people that were fixtures in my life, loved ones, people that I really cared about. I don't want to say no to them because I don't want them to be disappointed in me or about a situation. So yeah, that's kind of how it showed up and how it still shows up. What about you?
Yeah. I mean, it's been like, a lifelong journey of understanding what it means to be a people pleaser. And, the way that it showed up, I love how you said it. It's like a performance. It's like someone makes a request and maybe like, I'm not feeling good or I want to say no. And it's like, sure, let me do it. I'll make sure I add some sprinkles on top of it for you, and like, so
right, you lay it on thick almost.
Right. Like not even yes, like yes. And I'm going to do the best possible job with a song and dance too. So you like me. It's like not even about being nice, for me, it was always about like overextending and like sacrificing my well-being in a sense so that other people liked me. And I feel like, it's been this lifelong journey, but when I really started to think about when it showed up for me, it showed up like in elementary school. I had two very like nasty teachers in 4th grade. Like they were verbally abusive, like the teacher threw chairs if you got a note wrong. Yeah. And the 4th grade teacher like would tell you who her favorite students were and then buy them presents and give them presents in front of the whole class. And so I learned like in 4th grade, like be quiet, be easygoing, be nice, say yes, and do it with a song and dance so that you're safe from being like yelled at or like causing a teacher to get so angry they throw like chair across the room and stuff.
If it wasn't obvious, Abby and I were in elementary school in the 80s and early 90s. Yeah, so interesting. But yeah, I mean, I like what you said about or that you agreed about the performance and like, and not only am I saying yes, but I'm adding more on top of it. There's sprinkles now. There's whipped cream. Here's our analogy for the day. We always we always have an analogy with our comfort zones episode. It was all about water, which we didn't intend. And maybe today's will be extra layers on the ice cream. The ladder of that sounds delicious. Yeah, I think for me too, I always look to try to be as many things to everyone as possible. Right? I want to be a good friend, I want to be a good wife, I want to be a good daughter, good colleague. I want to be considered good. And what that means is different to everybody. And it's certainly different in my own head.
Right.
And like I've said many times about myself is that I'm the one typically putting these pressures, these false realities into my own head. And it's like, oh man, if I say no, if I miss that outing or if I skip a meeting or if I decide I need to take a day off work because I need a mental health break. And what happens if this saying no leads to more no's or suddenly these people don't want me in their life anymore. Right. And it just, your head
Right.
kind of takes you to those like extremes
Yeah.
sometimes too, when it
I
comes
mean,
to.
saying yes is like a way of keeping yourself safe. It keeps you safe from having like keeping your job. It keeps you safe. Like your husband will love you. I mean, not really your husband, but just in general. Like if I say yes to my husband all the time, that means he's going to love me and he won't leave me.
Right.
And, all of that yes there really at the sacrifice of you is like in your mind, keeping you safe from the alternative.
Right. Because it's like, if saying no leads to a person not being in my life anymore, do I really want to know this person?
Yeah.
Mm. Right.
Yeah.
How much of a fixture does this person need to be in my life?
Right. Tell me some of these people pleasing moments in your life. Like what came up for you?
Yeah. So this was back in 2011. Well, for about 7 years, I was working at a camp. This was a long time
Mhm.
ago.
Yeah.
I had this job right out of college. Obviously, it was a seasonal position. And I started out as a counselor for a couple of years, and then I became a director inside one of
Mhm.
the camps. At the camp was a huge, huge program, and so there were mini camps within the larger camp. And
Mhm.
so I wound up being the assistant director, and then the director the following year. And I had that job for a couple of years, and it was for the early childhood age kids in the camp. And we always had between like 60 and 90 kids, and it was just a grueling job. So fun, so rewarding,
Yeah.
bananas, 6 weeks of insanity, but really,
Yeah.
really fun. Anyway, in 2011, my husband Adam and I got married. And so leading up to that, I was like, I think, our wedding was a destination wedding, and then we were going to be having a big ceremony, a big reception when we got back, 3 weeks
Mhm.
later. And I knew it was going to be an insane month of July. And I was like, I obviously can't work camp this year. Not going to happen.
Yeah.
And because it was a seasonal job, they don't hold the gig for you no matter how many years you've had it. And so I knew that when I relinquished the role as director of this mini camp inside the camp, that I would that was it. The job was gone. And I accepted that. I was like, yeah, that's fine. Like, I had been there for many years. I was kind of ready to move on anyway.
Yeah.
Maybe I was a teacher at the time, maybe take my summers off or find something a little bit less grueling. Lots of outdoor hot days, tater tots
Mhm.
flying everywhere, Play-Doh smell, sweat smell. It was a great fun job, but it had its drawbacks for sure. And so anyway, we had a wonderful wedding. The year went on, and the following year, leading up to the summer, so one of the main camp directors reached out to me and was like, "Hey, Margot, we know that you're not going to be returning as director for the little ones this year, but we had this opening come up where the director is having a baby and she can't come back this year. Are you interested?" And it was for the gifted program,
Mhm.
and I had a lot of questions, but I didn't ask them all. So that was like my
Oh.
first step. Step one was a mistake of like not advocating for like, I have a lot of questions about this, but I'm afraid to ask them.
Yeah.
And then I kind of just felt like, all right, well, I don't have a job yet for the summer. Maybe I can't just sit home and do nothing. Sure. Okay. Why not? So I kind of just on the fly was like, yeah, okay, I'll do it. And, but I didn't, deep down, almost immediately, I knew it was a mistake.
Yeah.
And so weeks went by. No, I mean, a few weeks went by, and this horrible, horrible layers of anxiety upon layers of anxiety started. About every day that went by, I was more and more worked up and anxious about saying yes to this gig that I knew in
Mhm.
my heart wasn't right for me.
Oh boy.
But I was like, okay, it's fine. It's fine. It's fine. Push through. It's only 6 weeks, but I was already getting phone calls from parents, which at my old position was not a thing. But
Mhm.
because these gifted children's parents were a little bit more demanding, and they had higher expectations for their kids, maybe, who knows, but I was getting personal phone calls to my phone. I was expected to respond to emails I wasn't getting paid for, weeks in
Mm.
advance of camp. And every day I just would wake up with horrible, horrible stomach pain,
Oh.
body pain, just sweaty tension, crying. And I wasn't even 100% sure why. I just knew something felt wrong physically.
Yeah.
And I didn't know what to do about it at that point. We were less than 2 weeks out from camp, and I just felt like I was physically ill. I'd reached the point where it was 2 weeks to go, and I was actually sick all the time.
Mm. Mm.
And
Wow.
Adam and my parents were just like, what are you doing? Don't
Yeah.
do this to yourself. You don't owe these people anything. To them, you're just an employee. You're not important to them.
Right.
You have to be important to yourself. And I was kind of just like, okay, like I don't think I can. I don't think I can disappoint them. I can't say no. Now we're 2 weeks away. This was what am I going to do? I can't. I feel like I can't back out. And then one day I woke up and I was like I couldn't get out of bed. I was it was that overwhelming. And so I emailed them. I left messages because nobody was picking up their phone. I let them know that I wasn't going to be able to take the job, and I apologized profusely. Which it's like in hindsight, it's like again, I didn't necessarily owe them any of that. They still had a couple of weeks. It could have been worse. Um, and I once I didn't get a hold of anybody, I was like, okay, that's it. I sent out all my messages. I called, left messages, and nothing came of it. And then like an hour later, my phone was blowing up, emails galore. And I was in the middle of working still. I was finishing up my school year. And so I couldn't answer the phone, right? When they wrote me back. I feel like I had emailed them and called like on my lunch break or something. I just had I had dragged myself out of bed that morning, went to work, even though I felt really sick. And again, more people pleasing mistakes going to work when you feel sick because you don't want to disappoint your kids and administration and whatever. And so, when I finally talked to someone later on, they weren't happy, but it was what it was. But then I received an email from the main director that was, to put it mildly, the least compassionate thing I've ever received via email before in my life. And I had basically went so far to say to these people over the phone, this was the first time I had verbalized my anxiety and my severe lack of self-care and advocated for my mental health needs outwardly to people that I worked for. I had never spoken about this kind of stuff to people that I worked with and for. Kept this completely bottled up. And so I had found the brave to tell them exactly, explicitly why I couldn't take this job. And I'm so sorry to let you know at the end of the wire here a little bit. And this person, it was all about them. They were angry. It was as if my years I had spent working there were like flushed down the toilet because I told them I was having severe mental health and wellness breakdown at that point. And he could not care less. But it was kind of so of course, after I received this message, I was devastated. I was completely devastated, and I was crying. And, Adam and my mom was like, this is exactly why what you did was the right thing. This is the best email you've ever gotten, because now you understand what I was telling you, right? Which is they don't care about you. Only you can care about you. Right. And she told me, and this has stayed with me since 2012 when this happened. Margot, she said, I spent way too many years never taking time off, never saying no, or taking care of myself in the way that I needed to when it came to work, especially. My parents are in their mid 70s. Their work ethic was like, they were working since they were like tweens and taking care of people and bringing home money and doing stuff. So they didn't value and prioritize rest in the same way that all humans should have and needed to forever since the dawn of time and work. So yeah, I didn't value my rest or my own needs at the time. She said, don't make my mistake. That was a pivotal thing after she said that. And I still have a very strong work ethic, but I'm also okay with taking the time when I need it now. Right. And advocating for myself. And the thing that sucked about it is that, like I said, I had worked up the courage to not only not take the job, but to tell them why I wasn't taking the job. And what I was met with was, in my view, a tragedy, a serious bummer. It was the worst way for me to like officially leave working for these people. But it's a story that has stuck with me because it's like, I need to advocate for me. There's nobody else around to do it.
And it's very also interesting, like when you put up boundaries, when you're like, I won't do this or I can't do this, the people's reaction is very telling too. Like that part, like I love the reframe from your mom and Adam about like, read this email. Like it really has nothing to do with you. Like, did you really want to be a part of this for 6 weeks during the summer? Like,
no, it was all about screwing them over.
mhm.
And they didn't care. I mean, the one line was just like, sorry, you're sorry you're having a hard time with your mental health, I feel like was the line. It was like, wow, okay. That's something.
Yeah.
That is something. So it
Yeah.
was a learning moment for sure.
So
For sure.
there's so many pieces in this, but at the very beginning of your story, you share how, they offered you the job and you like felt like a pit in your stomach, or you felt immediately that you should say no and you didn't. And so
Mhm.
my question is have you had that experience since then where now you say no?
All the time.
Twinkle!
I mean, that's what I'm saying. Sparkle shine, twinkle fingers. I mean, yes, that's what I'm saying. Like
Yeah.
it definitely was a pivotal aha moment for me. And look, like you said, we've talked about this before we started recording, that
Yeah.
all of this is on a spectrum.
Right.
All the people
Right.
pleasing it's not like, oh, I've learned to take care of my own needs and to prioritize my own needs, so I'm never going to be a people pleaser again. No, that's
Right.
not how this works. But I 100% since then, I've worked really hard on the right way to set up boundaries for work situations.
Mhm.
And just a lot of it's come from just age and time and
Yeah. And
practice.
practice.
Yeah. So
Yeah.
good question. But yes, I love saying no now. No is a complete sentence.
Yeah.
I don't worry anywhere near as often as I used to about um disappointing other people.
Right.
I
Because
worry
now,
more about disappointing myself and my own
right.
needs.
That's what I was going to say. Now, by saying no, you're pleasing Margot. Like now, Margot doesn't have to suffer
Right.
through, the saying yes and the consequences of it. Which, we're not taught in school. We're not taught how to like set boundaries and that we can still be liked and say no, or we're okay that we're not being liked. Like not everyone will like us, and that's okay too.
Right. Like one of the fun things about it is that I used to judge people sometimes based on them saying no, or like, wow, that person takes off a lot of days at work. Like I'm here every day. Like my first year teaching, I was at school I didn't miss a single day of
Mhm.
work. And I was like, who am I doing this for? I get 5 paid sick days every year. Why aren't I taking them?
Yeah.
And I could have used it many days. I'm sure I showed up to work not like myself. Like I said before, it was like I went to work that day in June, right before summer camp was about to start, and I made the
Mhm.
call, but I was at work even though I got up that morning and I could barely like get myself ready for work. And I
Right.
was supposed to go and be a great teacher. Like, no, of
Yeah.
course I probably was nowhere near my best self that day. Just this
Right.
whole thing weighing on me. And now I'm kind of, when I hear people say no, especially in a very bold way, I'm like
Mhm.
impressed.
Yes.
That's like an aspiration. It's like, yeah, okay, you
Right.
really, it's a no from you, and I can see that. I can appreciate that. It's
Right. Well
empowering,
done on the boundary setting. Like
right?
you are a role model for so many.
Cool. Well, thanks for
Yeah.
listening. I can't
Oh,
wait to hear about your stuff.
yeah. I mean, mine is similar, and something else that I heard in your story, which I'm sure everyone, or at least I can relate to, is like you didn't understand necessarily your need to people please, right? And so you didn't really know how to communicate that part, right? Like I
Yeah.
feel like when we're not aware, and not like it's like, hey, I'm a people pleaser, so I said yes, like, but instead like being able to pause and ask ourselves, why are we saying yes and what else needs to be communicated? Like you said, you had all those questions that you never asked because the people pleasing part of you was like, yes. And then there was no other
And
like,
that was it.
and that was it. And so I just can very much relate to that part of it because in my people pleasingness too, I thought that like asking questions would be an inconvenience. Right. And part of being a people pleaser means that I can't inconvenience others because then I'm not pleasing them. I'm
Mm.
displeasing them. Right. Um, so I mentioned earlier a little bit about elementary school and how I really think that like fourth grade shaped my people pleasing because, even in like, and I would say school as a whole really shaped it because, in school we're asked to conform, we're asked to all behave so we can learn and make sure, the teachers feel comfortable. So, even through middle school and high school, I remember like testing the waters a few times and not being a people pleaser, and then like getting in trouble and being sent to the principal's office, or, like talking back was something I tried a couple times. Where I'd say like, this is ridiculous. Why are we? I'd question. And then I got in trouble for it. So I learned it's better to just be quiet, not speak up. So this also like followed me into my work area. And in many different jobs. I worked at a school for 8 years as a teaching assistant. And I didn't really speak up when I was feeling underappreciated or when I also needed mental health days. But when I moved to New York City, I found a gig that I loved. And I found like, I was doing something in my life that I loved, which I never thought was possible to love work. Right? I thought work was like I could enjoy it, right? But could I really like do something I love that would pay the bills? So instantly I was like all in with this gig because it brought me a lot of joy. But what it really led to was a lot of sacrificing of my well-being to please the bosses. And so very early on, I was told in order to get work, I would have to jump through hoops. And because I love this work, I was like, give me all those hoops. I'll keep doing it. Right.
Set some fire to those hoops.
Yeah, that's right. I will dive through those hoops. And, I justified it because it was work that I loved. But then it started to keep adding on. It was like, hey, we really want you to be part of the team. So we want you to come to these unpaid meetings. Right. And it's like, woohoo, I'm part of the team, unpaid meetings. Right. And then it started to be like, hey, we want you to take on other hats and other jobs with us, but we need you to learn them for free. So I ended up doing like hundreds of hours of just totally unpaid work because it was work that I loved. And there was never clear answers, right? Like the few times I would ask stuff like what to expect with my schedule or what to expect with my pay, it always like appeared that I was being inconvenienced when I asked those questions. So I didn't really ask them. And the other thing was like I was afraid of sticking up for myself and saying no. And I was afraid to put up boundaries because I saw that when other people said no, or when other people didn't jump through hoops, they didn't get the work. And so I was really afraid, to not only like, bring it back to the ice cream, like not only like not give the ice cream, but I was really afraid, like if I didn't give chocolate syrup and a cherry and sprinkles, like I wouldn't get this work and I wouldn't have the joy of doing something so meaningful.
You wouldn't get to taste the ice cream.
I wouldn't get to taste it. Right. And I was tasting some of it, but it wasn't super satisfying because I was sacrificing my wellness and my well-being in the process of it. It was like the trade-off. And so, I pretty much had no problem sacrificing myself because I loved the work. For a long time, I just went with the flow with it. But then really what happened was my father got sick. And then I went home to care for him and I had to put boundaries up because I couldn't accept all the same amount of work because I was caring for him. And then he passed and I had things I had to do, including grieving. And so I stopped jumping through hoops. I still showed up to all of the jobs that I committed to. But I said no to more things. I didn't go to any unpaid meetings. A lot of that happened. I started saying no and setting boundaries. And I started to hear like all of these nasty things that were being said about me during my grief. And that was that moment where it was like my aha moment. Like, oh, I don't need to be pleasing these people. They don't value mental health at all. Right? Like they said I should be bouncing back faster just a couple months after my father passed. And I was still taking on jobs. It wasn't like, even if I couldn't take on jobs, it should be okay. But I was still working. I just wasn't agreeing to unpaid stuff. And so, for me, what I really learned in that moment was like, first of all, it's okay to say no, right? It shouldn't have to go to that extreme, right? Um, Also, the what comes up, like how people really show themselves the moment you stop being that people pleaser, which I think shows up in both of our stories.
Yeah.
Right? The moment we put a boundary, the moment we say no to something, how are we treated? Like, do we really want to be with these companies when their reaction to mental health is so unsupportive?
Mm-hmm.
Um,
Yeah. I mean, so I mean, there's so much. I, one thing I heard you saying was just like, and this was true for me, is when you start noticing a pattern in behavior too, right?
yes.
Sometimes I know for me, it's like, why did it take me so long to figure out that this was a toxic place, which we're going to be talking about in our next episode
Mhm.
a little bit when people pleasing becomes toxic. But um, it's like, why did it take this long? It's like, well, because maybe the pattern didn't present itself
Yeah.
until that time. And so just knowing that we can't necessarily beat ourselves up for all the times when we allowed our people pleasing to get in the way of what we needed.
Yeah.
um and if it takes us a long time, it takes you warriors out there a long time to arrive at that place, that's okay.
Yeah.
And maybe us talking about it hopefully inspires you or helps you to take a closer look at the people and the relationships you have in your life to say, yeah, what are some patterns that I'm noticing? And another thing I thought about was just what you were saying about like when you don't jump through hoops and then all of a sudden stuff starts to go away when you're done
Mhm.
with the adding the sprinkles and the cherry and serving and never, being able to take back and enjoy, is that this feeling of you should just be grateful to work,
Yeah.
right? You
Yes.
should just be grateful for anything. And I love my Glennon Doyle, so I'm going to quote her again right now
Yeah.
because what you said really triggered me in this quote. She says in her book, "We are trained to believe that we're supposed to be grateful all the time,
Yeah.
and if we can imagine more, that means we're not grateful enough. When really,
Mm.
if we can imagine more, that might mean that we were meant for more."
Yeah.
And I just feel like that quote is really fitting for what you were just talking about, because it's
Yeah.
like I think it's easy for us, all of us, to get stuck in this mentality of like, I don't have it as bad as other people,
Yes. Yep.
right? And so I should just take it, deal with it, live with it, be
Mhm.
grateful for it. And in our line of work too, sometimes constantly being told like, just be
Right.
grateful. That's not necessarily helpful. And it seems like when you were dealing with the loss of your dad so recently, the gut punch of hearing ridiculous, unfair sentiments towards
Yeah.
you.
It's
Um,
I mean,
it's
it's like
crazy.
gaslighting. Like it was so mind-blowing to me because I was going to jobs. I was working. I stayed with my commitments that I had made, and I was showing up early, and I was still overextending myself in the jobs that I was doing, and no one really asked me how I was doing. No one, and I understand, like, a grieving person, maybe you don't know how to talk to them, right? It's hard. Like, death is hard. That's a hard conversation to talk about. Um, but to say that I wasn't bouncing back fast enough, that was the moment that everything changed. It was never going to be enough for these people, and that was the moment. It was like that was the shift. That was when, like, I was, whenever they asked me to do stuff, I was like, what is the agreement? Tell me the clear
Mhm.
expectations. What is the payment? When am I going to find out the information? Like, and I started to become more of an inconvenience, and I noticed our relationship changed. But you know what? I just felt better with myself. I was less stressed. I was more connected to myself. I felt like a more empowered person being able to set boundaries and speak up for myself. So I was pleasing me, right? I felt better
Yeah.
about it, even though the relationship with this job that I loved had changed.
Right.
Yeah.
Well, it's amazing to think like how different our stories were, but at the same time had a lot of the same um, notes to it.
Yeah.
And I think that
Yeah.
it's even when a situation seems like it's quote unquote bad on its face, right? Like a relationship ended, or it changed or those dynamic. But at the end of the day, change is important, especially if like what we're going to focus on in our next episode, if relationships and all that people pleasing becomes really, really toxic.
Right.
So yeah.
Right. And, like just, yes, these were both about work and stuff, but, I think that something else that's really important is one, we both kind of had some red flags that we chose to ignore for a period of time, and we can talk about that also in our next podcast about, when people pleasing becomes toxic and when we see these red flags and why we might choose to ignore them. But I think it's just really helpful, at least it's been for me, is when I spot a red flag to give it attention. Right. And then choose, okay, do I want to ignore this red flag or is this information? Um, and the other thing that I've really learned, like, and we're talking about how people pleasing is, it's a lifelong journey. We're still pleasing some people sometimes, we're still performing sometimes, but maybe we're not overextending ourselves as much. But I feel like when we're really thinking about, people pleasing, if we're afraid of being an inconvenience, that's a lot of information for us. If we're afraid to ask questions, to have more clarity around something, that should be information to us. Because asking questions and getting clear agreements, either in work or in any type of relationship, is not being inconvenient. That's being a good communicator, And so, I just think that has really helped me in the journey, is just learning it's okay to ask questions. It's okay to make sure everything is clear before agreeing to something.
Totally.
Yeah.
Yeah, completely. I think that makes complete sense.
Yeah.
And so we hope that anyone listening can derive that we are still people pleasers sometimes.
Yeah.
And it's an active practice. It's something we work on all the time, noticing it, right? Becoming aware of its presence and then being able to ask yourself, okay, where am I at with this particular person or with this situation? And advocate for your own needs at every turn and try to you get better at noticing those patterns as you grow and as you practice.
Right.
And it won't be a one size fits all quick band-aid fix like, okay, Margot and Abby, how do I how do I stop people pleasing? No, we wish we could answer that question more fully, but yeah, I think that just learning to show up for yourself, to advocate, to surround yourself with people who are good listeners that can hold that mirror up to you. Yeah.
Right. And I love, love that you said active practice, right? It's like that little building the muscle, like, being able to maybe first say no to your to-do list. Like, to-do list, I need to go for a 30-minute walk.
Dishes, do yourself for once.
Yeah. Right. And then like flexing that muscle and then practicing like saying no to like, no, I'm not going to the grocery store today or whatever, and we don't have to like say no to our bosses and risk losing our job right away, but we can like feel comfortable saying no more often.
Yes. All the sprinkle fingers.
Do you have a win of the week?
I do have a win of the week to share. Win of the week. We still have to work on that sting. We're going to get
We'll get
it. Be us singing it one of these.
Or it will be, but it'll be a pre-recorded version of us singing.
Oh, yeah. Right. It won't just be like off the cuff. Unless you all like that. Let us know, I guess.
Yeah.
Okay. So my win of the week is very fitting because both of us talked a little bit, mostly actually, about works related stuff. And so my win this week was not taking personally when someone told me that they couldn't afford my services.
That's huge.
Yeah. And it was one of those things where like, I was impressed with them just being really blanket about like, I wish I could, but I can't. Mm-hmm. Right. And actually, instead of not emailing me back, actually just saying like, thanks so much for your response. And here's where I'm at. Yeah. And then I could properly thank them too. And I made sure to thank them for letting me know that was the situation. Right. And, we'll stay connected and whatever. But at the end of the day, that was another thing too. It's like, I want to say yes to all the jobs. I want to make all the schools happy. I want to make all the potential clients happy. And if I say no to one gig, maybe no one else will call me for another gig. And I know that, it's somewhat irrational, those thoughts, but that's what happens. They come up. And so I was able to sit when I received this message and breathe and read it a couple of times, not too many times, but read it a couple of times and just say to myself, I know market value for what I do.
Yeah.
I know my worth.
Yeah.
And I held my ground and I didn't deviate from what I knew to be true and right. And so it clearly just wasn't a good fit, and that's okay. I am not a disappointment. And yeah, so that was a really big win for me, was not taking it personally. Being able to just say, that's what it is. And I wish these people well. And I feel like I'm getting that same energy from them. And we all move on.
Right.
Yeah.
Right. You didn't feel like you needed to compromise yourself. You didn't feel like you needed to change you to fit what they needed. And that's,
or just say, be grateful that someone reached out and they wanted your services, Margot. So you better take it. No.
Right. You never know when the next job's going to come. Like all those fears can come up. That's awesome. I love.
Thanks.
I'm gonna use some more
extra twinkles,
extra twinkles with sprinkles on top.
Sprinkles. Anyway, thank you so much for being here with us, warriors. And we are so excited for you to tune in next week when we are going to be actually taking this topic a little bit deeper and talking about when it's toxic and when it's time to really pick up those bags and leave. So warriors, we want to hear from you as always. You can reach out to us on Instagram at Anxiety Warriors Podcast, or please feel free to send us an email. We love emails, anxietywarriorspodcast@gmail.com. If you think you'd be a great fit for a guest on our show. We hope you enjoyed our first interview with Lauren last week. We're going to be talking to someone else very, very special coming up very, very shortly. And so if you think you'd be an awesome fit for the pod, definitely shoot us an email or a DM on Instagram. And smash that 5-star rating on Apple Podcasts. Leave us a couple sentences or a full paragraph. I mean, we'll read whatever you all want to share.
Yeah, you want to do emojis? Do emojis.
Whatever feels right to you, warriors. But we love to see it. And we're so grateful for your support. Thank you for being here.
Yes. Thank you all so much for going on this journey with us. We're just so grateful you all are here.
Love you, warriors. Till next time.